Warning: the following audio may contain coarse language, as well as discussion of material that may not be suitable for younger audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Also, we may spoil just about anything that pops into our heads. We hope you enjoy. Alrighty, so, do you want to do the intro? Do you
Oh,
want me to do the intro, or...
give me 1 second. I gotta grab a notebook.
Oh, for the love of fuck.
Oh,
Okay. Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the first real episode of our podcast, Understated Thoughts. My name is William, and just like last time, I am joined by my good friend Tom.
hello, William.
Hello, Tommy. I attacked on Tommy instead of Tom.
Oh,
What?
hi, William.
Oh, hi, Tom. Ah ha 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 ha. That's the
What a cute
that
doggy.
that's how you start off a podcast. You make a room reference.
We'll see how many people have actually seen that to get that reference.
Well, I mean, it's a meme unto itself. So even if people haven't necessarily seen it, they've probably at least heard of it. I mean,
Very true.
this is the internet after all.
You can find anything on the internet.
Yeah, that gets spread faster than herpes. Anyway. The grimace that you had was so beautiful. I loved it. Oh, wow. Okay. So, for today's episode, somehow having to get back on track, we are going to take a...
We're already off it.
We're already off, and we're, what, like 1.5 minutes into this? Whatever.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. Anyway, so for today's episode, we are taking a step away from the campy that we did last time, and stepping way more into the neo-noir science fiction world. We've got 3 movies that we want to talk about today, and I guess we might as well just jump right in. Why not? Let's start with the first one that we saw, which was Ghost in the Shell, which we talked about seeing last time on the podcast, actually. So it's nice to have, I guess, some semblance of continuity.
Right. We have some of that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not herpes, but, you know.
That's an endless continuity.
It's a vicious cycle, I'll tell you what now.
It is a vicious cycle. You weren't making a Dane Cook reference, were you, by the way?
No, I hate Dane Cook.
Good, so do I. Anyway.
His best role was probably in Mr. Brooks when he got his throat cut apart with a shovel.
See, I would argue...
Spoiler alert, by the way, everybody.
Oh, no, I remember...
died.
Now, there's a spoiler alert at the very beginning of these episodes anyway, so it's their own fault. No, I would say his best role was Simon Says, but that's just him acting like an idiot, which he plays very naturally. It's the weird, like, action spy flick with oh my god, I am blanking on his name. It's the NBA player that really loves Kim Jong-un. The
Rodman?
Thank you. I was like, it's not
really?
like...
Is that it? Oh my
yeah,
god.
I was like, it's not Dennis Lepper. That's not right.
Ooh.
But
you're just pulling names out of your ass now, aren't you?
Oh my god. Well, because I was listening to Def Leppard actually just before we started this, so that's part of the reason why that's been stuck in my head. But anyway, let's
Dennis Rodman, Dennis Leopard, Def Leppard. Yes,
but you can see why I inadvertently got mixed up, right?
No, it's not even close. Unless you want to go with like the old joke, "What has 9 arms and sucks?"
Oh my god. Anyway, so Ghost in the Shell.
Ghost in the Shell, the original anime version of Ghost in the Shell
from 1995. So we're not. So just for clarification's sake, we're not talking about Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, which is the television version, which takes place in an alternate universe. This is the one from the 1990s, 95, before, I guess we could say, anime became mainstream, and even then it's not really that mainstream.
This was one of those movies that broke anime into the Western audiences, along with Akira, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
Yeah, between the two of them, it was what really introduced a lot of Americans to the genre, other than like Voltron and the Transformers and stuff that was more kiddie fare.
yeah, because
Uh,
this
this
was
is
before the age of Toonami on Cartoon Network, I think. So this
it
was
was,
yeah,
I believe, yeah,
yeah,
before.
this was before anime was being marketed towards kids. Like you said, this was in the age of Akira and and the like. And it's ironic because they're both science fiction movies. So make of that what you will.
I
But
think a lot of the anime at the time being produced was primarily science fiction, or at least any of the ones that were getting exported were science fiction.
yeah, at least just from what I can immediately recall, I'd agree with that. I mean, also you're talking about like Gundam and stuff like that. But anyway, I mean, my at least immediate thoughts on Ghost in the Shell, I liked it.
I did as well. It was one of those movies that I've seen it multiple times,
Hmm.
and this time I've always just enjoyed the movie as a whole. But this time, as I'm sitting there actually like really paying attention to it, not that I didn't pay attention to it before,
It's like
but
got other
it's
things on your mind.
one of those ones you can kind of put on and not have to watch because not a lot happens in a lot of this movie.
Yeah.
But it is 50% great action set pieces and character development, and 50% pseudo religious philosophizing. That's I'm going to use that word whether it's real or not.
I'm pretty sure it's a real word. I think you're good.
Yeah, just philosophy schlock, and some of it doesn't. It's kind of one of those things that it's like what the Matrix tried to do when that
Yeah.
you know since the Matrix, this is the movie that inspired most of the Matrix anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
um but it was interesting watching it between the English dub and having the subtitles up for the Japanese because of what changed in it too,
Yeah, cuz I only
between the different translations.
yeah, cuz I only the version that I only watched it with the Japanese dub with English subtitles just because I didn't have any time to watch it dubbed. So I'd actually be rather interested in what you have to say about that.
It's one scene in particular always stood out to me is when they're on the boat and she's diving,
Oh
and
yeah.
she gets she gets the puppet master in her head, and
Yeah.
he starts rambling about now they're seeing through a glass darkly,
Yeah.
and so which is a biblical reference,
Yes, it is.
Corinthians, I believe.
I think you're right.
And in the English version they change it
Really?
to, yeah, and it's something about looking through a dark window.
Looking through a dark window.
It
You
yeah, it's a subtle enough change that it keeps the philosophy behind it, but it nixes the biblical behind it.
Yeah. I I prefer the other one just on hearing it sort of on the base level alone. Because I mean when we talk I mean it's true that windows, you can see yourself in a window, but a window primarily serves as a function of looking at something else through when you're standing either in the interior or looking in from the exterior. The idea of a mirror is to imply that there is at least in some semblance like a real element of reflection of like seeing yourself of seeing yourself as this person both on the physical level obviously as a mirror is supposed to be, but on the emotional level as in like I share this kind of emotion with you. So just based on what you described alone, I actually kind of prefer the to mirror darkly idea.
Well, the original reference,
Yeah.
um, what the I believe it's the Apostle Paul talking to the church,
Yeah.
and he talks about, it's kind of a reference for salvation, like before
Yeah.
he comes to Christ. um his whole world, he's looking at the world more or less through with blinders on, and
Hmm.
that's what I think they're going for in this movie.
Yeah.
Is kind of like he's trying to tell her that he's her salvation
Yeah.
for it,
Hmm.
and it loses a little bit in the translation. I felt when it moved over to English.
Yeah.
At the same time, it was a little ham-fisted with the original biblical reference as well.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a toss up in there, which one you prefer.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because I will say, like, with all of the because even though I liked, Ghost in the Shell, I guess maybe if I had one thing to at least just sort of just get out there, and you can obviously comment on this. I mean, that's why we're doing this in the first place. Is it was a movie that well, if I could also talk, that'd be one thing. It was
It
a
would
mo-
just help.
it was a movie that had a lot of really great ideas. I just don't think that uh, either its pacing wasn't really able to keep up with all of them, and I think a part of the reason why was because the running time was so short. This was only like about a 90-minute movie, and
I believe you're right. Yeah,
you've got all of
it's
these ridiculously philosophical ideas, such as the idea between like the machine and the man, like the ghost in the shell, all this not pseudo religious imagery and sometimes iconography, and it's so many brilliant ideas that on their own would make for a great drama, but when you have all of that thrown into one blender and you try to get it all out in 90 minutes, the result is a little bit mixed. I mean, it was wildly ambitious. I just wish that it had a little bit more time to even out the pacing a little.
well, you could take the flip side of that and take a look at what the Matrix tried to do and pull that into a 7-hour epic, and
Yeah.
with all that philosophy, and they've managed to fail completely after the first movie.
And Keanu Reeves.
I liked Keanu for that role.
Oh,
He was
yeah, that was great.
perfect for that
He was.
that deer in the headlights kind of thing. Like what the everything to do. Whoa, you know.
It's like, this is
So,
amazing, man.
but yeah, you're right. There is some pacing in this, and I think that's one of the things that I like most about the non-philosophical parts of this movie
Yeah.
are that it does take its time to slow down and let you appreciate the animation
Hmm.
that in this movie. I mean, this movie is practically a love letter to animation.
Oh yeah.
It,
I mean, because I know that like especially because I watch a lot of anime, and I know that even for some people who are anime fans, the like the various periods of anime aesthetics. So I mean, like the style of Ghost in the Shell is wildly different from like Akira, which is wildly different from stuff that's being made nowadays. Like stuff just doesn't look like that. So there is a bit of an aesthetic barrier. But I mean, this movie is gorgeous. This movie is really gorgeous.
right, and it takes it time. It takes its time to show it off
Oh
too, and
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's an entire segment in the middle of it where it's a musical interlude, and it's like 3 or 4 minutes of just
Mm-hmm.
street scenes.
Yeah.
They're just panning over various parts of Tokyo. You get this airplane helicopter thing flying overhead, and they're just even the action scenes, like the chase scenes,
Yeah.
are well paced. They're not
Yes, they
quickly
are.
rushed. There's not a lot of quick cuts. I saw the remake they did with Scarlett Johansson,
Yeah, I
and
have yet to see that.
there are a couple spots in there where they mimic the the visuals from this movie,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't come off anywhere near as fluid or as just crisp
Mm-hmm.
as this movie pulls off. Like when she's chasing after the trashman,
Yeah.
and the guy with the Uzis running, and this is a this is a guy that's only on screen for 5 6 minutes,
If even, yeah.
and he's still a developed character
Yeah.
in that 5 or 6 minutes. You understand what's happened to him, that he's been ghost hacked,
Mm-hmm.
these kind of things. Why the trashmen are picking up the things. They keep the plot in terms without the philosophical stuff very coherent.
They do.
which I think helps with the fluidity of the movie. You don't need a whole lot of fast pacing when you have the storyline strung together so well.
Yeah.
And and the major in this one keeps a consistent character in this, and I think that's one of the things I really was disappointed with the remake was, like here you can tell because of the cybernetic body, she's got obvious physical strengths and agility compared, to a normal human. The way she
Yeah.
just like takes this guy
Mm-hmm.
apart, and the continuity in it as well in terms of where the visuals. You can get a lot of cartoons where one background doesn't need to run into another,
Mm-hmm.
but watching this you can see the whole flow of from one place to another till they end up in the water.
Yeah.
It's not like suddenly out of the blue, like all of a sudden, oh, we're fighting in the water, where did this come from? I mean, there's a long chase that happens before they get there.
Yeah. I mean, they're running through basically the city. I think it's Tokyo. The city this movie takes place in, or something like that. I mean, they
Yeah,
basically run.
it's like
Yeah,
New Tokyo
yeah,
or whatever.
they basically run through a street bazaar, and like there's all these like chases through like alleys and whatnot. And so like when they get to the water, it makes sense. And part of the reason why is because so much time is taken to make the environment really feel like it's breathing, like it's real. I mean, there was one and this is just because as I was watching Ghost in the Shell, um, it reminded me of something that Roger Ebert actually once said on like Siskel and Ebert way back when Beauty and the Beast actually came out. Um, when he said, animation is in a way the ideal uh, visual form for the movie musical. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go so. I would actually maybe go just a little bit of a step further and say it's not that I don't think it's that unreasonable to say that animation is maybe the ideal uh, form for fantasy in general. Just because
I would agree with you on that because you can create a world exactly to your specifications.
yeah,
You get things like the set designers creating the scenes, the mise en scène
yeah,
for all this various things. So, but they've got to go out, they've got to find props, or they've got to create props, they've got to build sets, these
yeah,
kind of things. When you have a hand drawn background, every single line is carefully placed.
yeah,
Everything that you want in that scene, that you want to show off in that scene, is exactly there. The way
hmm
the characters move or way they look
hmm
is exactly how you want them to move or look. You don't have to rely on the actor's interpretation of the lines of their scene, what's their character motivation. The only thing you'd have to worry about is the voice acting, which
yeah,
it's can be go one way or another depending on
yeah.
things. But
And also, I mean that brings up an interesting point about like just the sheer level of acting that has to be involved because I mean we're in the year 2017. And even now, we can't necessarily get CGI to look like it's in place with real people. Like that's
no,
still for a lot of movies that's still a relatively large obstacle. I mean, the last time that I watched a movie and I felt like the CGI was not distracting was actually the live action remake of The Jungle Book because to me it felt like an actual jungle. I mean, I obviously know that it wasn't. Most of it was like raised platforms shot against a blue screen, and based on the face you're giving me right now, something tells me that you're not crazy about that movie.
I wasn't. I have to say I did not enjoy that version of it.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I actually don't like the original Jungle Book.
As much as I liked Christopher Walken, I'm gonna leave it right there. And you
Yeah,
know exactly what I'm talking
I know
about.
exactly what you're talking about. And also, let's be realistic. Christopher Walken can't hold a candlestick to Louis Prima.
No,
No,
no, but
like,
I mean, it was he was so wildly out of place for that particular role. And then you have Bill Murray as Baloo, who was I love Bill Murray. Don't get me wrong.
yeah, I mean, most
It
people love
just
Bill Murray. I love Bill Murray.
it's I don't know. I just felt like everything about that movie was just wrong and unnecessary. The only thing that I enjoyed about that movie was the tiger
Oh,
with
Shere Khan.
yeah, Idris Elba there.
Yeah,
He was fantastic. The voice for him was spot on. I mean, you couldn't pick for a better voice for that.
yeah. Okay.
but everybody else just it was just weirdly, I don't know, it didn't fit for me.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can understand that. That's not necessarily one of our bigger disagreements ever. I mean, I'm sure that throughout the course of these episodes, we'll have more than our fair share of rumbles of
Oh,
of
don't worry, I'm sure we'll find one. Just wait till our musical episode. I'm excited for that.
I'm excited for that too. We'll just have to decide when to do that. But so cuz as I think about just again going back to the animation of this thing, I mean, I knew that I mean, well, one, I love the sequence where she's submerged and her body is getting deconstructed and reconstructed, and it's that whole sequence with that high pitched sort of like
Is it
weird.
the opening sequence, like
It's
the
yeah, it's like
opening credit
yeah, I
sequence?
think
Yeah,
it's like the opening credit sequence. Yeah, and you've got like those voices doing that weird like
it's like an
thing.
ethereal
Yeah,
choir of Japanese
yeah.
female singers.
Yeah, and I
But
actually I actually kind of like the fact because unlike the movie, the James Cameron Avatar, where the chorus felt really phoned in, it didn't feel phoned in this time, and it felt almost unnatural and even I would dare say a little synthetic, which to me sort of stressed the point of like the line between machine and man getting blurred, and as you see Kusanagi's body, basically being picked apart and it's naked, but it's not like a sexualized naked either. I mean, it's not meant to be like a turn on or anything like that.
it's like a
Um,
birth
yeah,
sequence
it's like a birth
for a
sequence.
cyborg.
Yeah, it's like a birth
Yeah,
sequence for a cyborg. I'm just sort of sitting there, just mesmerized by the fact that they can make the body the animation seems in general much more able to make the body seem non-sexualized when it is in a state of like nudity or of like low dress or something like that. I mean, I'm not saying that it does that all the time, but it's I mean, obviously, but it's capable of doing that seemingly a lot easier than when it's live actors.
it did. I'm gonna compare it to the remake. They did do a similar sequence
I imagine that they
um,
did.
for the thing, but it was almost like it wasn't the same for it because they were trying to keep a PG-13 rating.
Oh yeah.
So it was kind of like they had a lot of makeup effects on her to show that she's got seams,
Yeah.
as opposed to this one where it's the entire skin is one coating
Yeah.
for her. It reminded me a lot of what Westworld, the new
Oh yeah.
what that was doing. But I got the feeling that maybe this is where the new Westworld got the idea from,
Hmm.
where they kind of like dipping through the liquid and pulling her out of it, and that's what coats the skin.
Yeah.
But you're right. A lot of the slow sequence, especially when they've got that chorus, because they use a similar one later with
Yeah. That's a
the
yeah.
street
Yeah,
sequence.
the chorus is recurring like 3 or 4 times throughout the course of this movie.
Right, and it's nice. It slows the movie down.
It
It doesn't.
really
You
does.
don't have to worry about plot in this moment. You're just sitting there enjoying the experience. It's almost like a
Hmm.
Fantasia moment.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good way to put it. Just like especially because Fantasia is a movie where there is no conventional 3 act structure. It's meant to be something where you sit and you experience it. I mean,
Exactly.
obviously with the visual aesthetic incorporated because it is a movie, but because the other thing is that as you're and I don't know if this happened to you, but in these moments where it does slow down, it does give you the chance to sort of reflect on like at least sort of the ideas that the movie is fiddling around with. But what I like is that it doesn't last. That they don't last too long. Is that they never feel drawn out, or they don't feel like they're really overstaying their welcome. Like
No, yeah,
these
that's
moments of
I feel
pause.
the same way. They're well timed. They're not too short. They're not too long.
Yeah,
They're put exactly in the right place for them to move on to the next set piece
yeah,
where that is. And this movie has got some great moments in it for in terms of like action set pieces. You've got the chase down the alleyway in the beginning. You've
hmm,
got the opening sequence
yeah,
of the the skyscraper dive and the assassination of
hmm.
the diplomat to begin. And then later with the spider tank,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
got
the
these
spider tank.
they've got these three big action set pieces that kind of work for this whole movie.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, this is the moment when you talk to somebody about this movie afterwards. Those are the ones that everybody remembers,
Oh
especially the
yeah,
spider tank at the
yeah,
end.
absolutely. Like that's
Uh,
definitely one of the moments that stuck with me long after this was over. It was one of those moments where you felt like you really watched something cool.
right. I mean, you don't see that kind of thing. At least I don't. I'm not a huge connoisseur of anime and stuff, but
Yeah.
you really get a feel for what she's going through in terms of a battle here when she tries to rip the top of this tank off,
Yeah.
and you get the power behind the tank that you don't
Yeah.
often see with especially a lot of the earlier action things, where blowing holes in the sides of these columns and things like that. It doesn't.
Hmm.
I mean, you get the raw power behind
Hmm.
that. Whereas if you're using blanks and cartridges and little and things that are popping out of the wall and stuff, it doesn't necessarily convey that the she's wildly outclassed
Yeah.
with
And
this thing.
and the moment that I knew that I loved the sequence was when she was trying to, rip the top off the tank and her body starts failing her. Because it serves as an
Oh
example. It
yes.
serves as an example that, I mean, yes, these are individuals whose bodies have been effectively transformed into machines. Uh, Admittedly, very powerful, very beautiful machines, but still machines that have their limits. And it actually makes it in a way a little hard to watch because with how the machine as a just as an idea is treated in this movie, it's treated as this very like top of the line, high importance, in a way almost sacred object, and to see it just sort of get desecrated by the fact that she can't do something just with her sheer brawn alone, it actually in a way makes it a little hard to watch.
It makes her more human. To me, it made her
Yeah,
more human.
yeah,
Like she's yeah, like you said, she's top of the line, but she's still outclassed. There's always something better out there.
yeah,
As I say, there's always bigger fish, kind of
yeah,
thing. And they do seem to treat the cybernetics with some sort of a reverence in this, as though technology is the pinnacle that we're attempting to achieve. Especially when they have their one guy on the team there that's got. I think they mentioned the only thing he's got is like a little implant in his head, so he can
yeah.
communicate with them.
Was that
He's
Bato or was that
he's
somebody else?
no, it was the Tawagachi,
Oh yeah, you're right.
or the guy with the revolver, the
That's right.
low
Yeah,
tech guy.
yeah. Hmm.
She even at one point comments at him. You do better with an automatic than with that old revolver.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so there's the contrast between the old ways with the humans who seem to be being rapidly left behind
yeah,
by technology in this. They're all,
yeah.
it's
You're
it's
not
not an
kidding.
oppression or anything like that, but they're being displaced by this new evolution of technology.
Yeah. And which is in a way of, I mean, this was, and also, I mean, this was made in the 90s. I mean, in a way, we're still sort of grappling nowadays with the fact that, the machine and automation and, the either the android or the cyborg may one day just sort of replace many human functions. I mean, this is something that we're dealing with now. And this movie was made in 95 when the internet was barely, becoming commercially available.
Oh, absolutely. And then you've got a lot of the movies nowadays are they're still catching up on this idea
Yeah.
too. This
Hmm.
movie presents so many ideas about man and technology that some movies have taken like one aspect of it
Yeah.
and made an entire movie out of it. Like you said,
Yeah.
this movie crams a lot of ideas into a 90-minute runtime.
It does. And unfortunately with mixed success, but I would still argue that the journey to get there, you know, pacing wise a little bit mixed as it was definitely a great experience. This was a good movie. This was a very good movie.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things I like, you know, oddly enough, that I really loved about it is the attention to detail to the weaponry in
Yes.
this movie as well.
Yeah.
Every gun looks like it can be there, should be there,
Mhm.
and they act professional with them, which is supposed to also, going back to the animation
Mhm.
versus human thing. You get a
Yeah.
lot of actors, and you hand them a gun that they haven't handled before, and
Yeah.
Gun safety protocol goes straight out the window in
It
this,
really
and
it really does.
everything in this movie just screamed about
Yeah.
gun safety.
Yeah.
They've
There's
got
a
they've got the magazine checks,
yeah,
the way
there's
she strips the assault rifle apart,
mhm.
and at one point, one of my favorite moments in this, like, just for professionalism, she does a slide check on her pistol
Mhm.
as opposed to full racking the chamber or taking the magazine out, looking re putting
Yeah.
that back in,
Yeah.
but or reloading. That's the word I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. I can't remember Dennis Rodman's name. You can't remember the word reloading.
We're doing well
We're doing
already.
very well. But I mean it just I think in general a lot of people underestimate the sheer understanding of physical movement that's needed to make animation look that good. I mean, like you said, like they very easily could have just made it something that she did either like okay, you didn't say this, but I mean, they could have made it easily something that she did off screen, or they could have made her miss a step. But I mean, just imagine the
It could
sheer
have just been you could have just assumed. I mean, it's
yeah.
animation.
I
You
mean,
don't have to
yeah.
assume that the
You don't
gun is loaded.
you
You
don't
watch her physically field strip this and load this weapon and prepare for herself. It's like a lock and load
yeah.
montage.
I mean,
Sort
that's the sheer level of detail. I mean, that's something that they much like the shadows in like the Toy Story, the first Toy Story movie back when like full-fledged computer CGI was just becoming new in movies. Like when they do the whole thing with like the accuracy of shadows. I mean, that's something that they don't have to do. But when you notice it, it really makes you appreciate just the sheer level of commitment and time and energy that goes into something like that, which makes it a more exciting visual experience because it makes you wonder where else do they pull that kind of stuff? And I mean, and
and
yeah, and I mean, in the opening sequence when her body's being taken apart, I mean, they really go through the effort to show it's like piece by piece. Like it's not just this thin level that's all one giant thing. I mean, it's broken into all these tiny little fragments that all come together to make one larger whole. I mean, where is that level of effort in most, even not necessarily even animated movies, but just movies in general?
no, you don't see that kind of thing outside of something like Stan Winston back when he made like the Terminator.
Yeah,
They didn't have to build a full size Terminator
no,
robot made out of metal, but
but
they did.
they did, and it's
And you believed that it was on screen there
yeah,
because it was. And like this, every component looks like it belongs. They put this thing together and it looks like something, you're watching a factory put together something,
yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
and I think you touched on it a little bit, but the fluidity of the movement in this movie
Hmm.
is very, very convincing that it is an actual person there. I mean, you get like some of the really low budget um, animations, or even some of the higher budgets especially in American cinema,
I was about to say, especially American
with
cinema.
some of the things, that it just doesn't flow quite as smoothly. Like they're using a little different frame rate,
Hmm.
and even some of this that they slow down the action. It's almost like it's in slow motion as well.
Yeah, because I mean
That
that's
you
what.
don't see a whole lot of that too often in animation,
Yeah, I
at
mean
least in the American.
yeah.
Uh,
That's one of the reasons why I am such a fan of anime because in general I love cartoons. I love the idea of like these exaggerated expressions for the sake of, entertainment. I think that's really really fun. But the reason why I tend to gravitate towards anime so much is because at least on a more consistent basis, it seems like more care is taken towards the fluidity of objects or the fluidity of bodies or just motion in general, which is why when it's jagged, it's sometimes even funnier because you know that it's wildly out of place, and it's usually out of place for a reason. Like I think of stuff like the Monogatari series, which is in and of itself very avant-garde, um, but I mean, it has this very bizarre alternation between, really fluid motion through space and characters doing things seemingly at the drop of a hat. And that's part of the reason why it's such an interesting show to watch is because it has more than its fair share of, these fluid moments that we keep talking about. But one of the reasons why it's so funny is because they move in such jagged, in a way like defying all logic fashions.
Right. It's kind of like it'd be like it. I from my experience in terms of what I've seen, it'd be like watching like a Studio Ghibli film
Yeah.
as opposed to like Lupin the Third or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, Lupin.
my anime experience is a little limited, but I've seen enough to know that yeah, there's the high quality ones, and then there's the ones that are kind of produced on the cheap for
Yeah.
still entertainment purposes, but
Hmm.
there's not quite the level of commitment to the animation as there is in some of these.
Yeah. No, I feel you. We should, but we should probably move on before we make this just a gigantic otaku-based episode because.
So we go from beautiful set pieces, and if we move on to the next beautiful set piece,
Hmm.
we're going to go into Blade Runner
Oh yes.
for the
Oh boy.
cinematography and the set design and
Oh
just the
wow.
visual aesthetics
This film is so beautiful.
of Blade Runner,
Oh
especially that
wow.
we both decided to sample the final cut, which
Yeah.
is Ridley Scott's last word on this
Yeah.
movie. Where he
Just
went
as
back, he tweaked some of the little visuals on it
yeah.
here and there,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah. I
just
feel
to
like
just to make them a little more fluid because some of them didn't quite age as well.
yeah. I feel like we should just very briefly explain like why the final cut is such a big deal in regards to Blade Runner. Just like a quick glanced overview, because this movie was originally released in 1982. By like you said, Ridley Scott, who some people would probably know for his sci-fi thriller Alien. And part of the problem with Blade Runner was, I mean, barring the fact that it was apparently, from all I've read, a very tense set and environment to work in, creative control was eventually taken away from Ridley Scott. So the version that came out originally was not the one that Ridley particularly wanted. And in subsequent years, it was edited and tweaked and was constantly being re-released both in theaters and on video format, all with all these new additions until eventually, if and correct me if I'm wrong, I think 2007 is the date of the final cut. I think for its like 25th anniversary or something like
I
that.
think it was even later than that.
Oh, you think so?
I can actually tell you because I have it sitting here in front of me.
Oh, really?
I do,
Yeah.
in fact.
Yeah, I had to stream this on Vudu because I don't own the actual movie itself.
I have the definitive Blu-ray cut with it.
Oh, nice.
That let's see. No, you were right. It is 2007. I honestly thought it was later than that.
Yeah. So as you so eloquently put, this is effectively Ridley Scott's final stamp on Blade Runner. As far as we know, there is no further version of Blade Runner that's coming out anytime soon.
There were four versions of this movie. There was the original theatrical,
Yeah.
which the biggest thing about that was the voiceover narrative
Oh yeah,
on it
Harrison
and
Ford's
the
voiceover.
the tacked on happy ending
Oh yeah.
to it, which Harrison did not. There's a lot of rumors about how he recorded it. Like he was trying to do as bad a job as humanly possible and hope that they wouldn't use it.
Considering
Um,
Harrison Ford, that would not surprise me.
it wouldn't, but at the same time, he's also said himself that he was he it wasn't that he was trying to do bad. He was doing the best with what he was given,
Yeah, which
and it
was
was
not
the
very good anyway.
executives that really had insisted on the voiceover, and it unfortunately it didn't fit the tone of the film.
No, it
And
it
then
did
you had
not.
the tacked on ending, which they drive off. And this entire film it's dark.
Yeah,
Even when it's well lit, like in the middle of the day, and there's no clouds or rain or anything.
yeah,
There's a lot of smog. It's Los Angeles in the future, and apparently the smog problem has gotten worse out there. So even in the it's very misty, and the background is obscured.
yeah.
So all of a sudden, the ending, you've got this. They're driving through this forest
Mm-hmm.
on this well-lit road,
It's just like,
and
what?
it's so wildly out of place. And one of the reasons it's so wildly out of place is originally unused footage from the opening of The Shining.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, that I did not know. Because I first saw Blade Runner years and years ago, back when I was younger, and I just maybe wasn't able to wrap my head around like the themes that Blade Runner was going for. And I remember even way back then thinking to myself, why are they driving in this really nice forest? Because I mean, in this effectively dystopian kind of city, with
Right.
which
I
is
mean,
the bulk of
they're hiking these
99% of the
off-world
dialogue.
colonies. Like Earth has turned into this giant,
Yeah,
cesspool.
it's a perfect word
And
for it. It is a cesspool. I mean, the owls are extinct,
everything. A
and just
lot of
about
yeah, a lot
everything
of
is
the animals.
extinct.
All the a lot of the animals in this movie are artificial. Which fits with the tone in this thing. Like the human artificial people are outlawed on Earth,
Yeah.
whereas the animals are not. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's a lot of themes that run through Blade Runner in
Yeah.
terms of you know humanity in this movie.
Yeah, because unlike Ghost in the Shell, Blade Runner had an extra 30 minutes to work with, and it shows that they really. I mean, it doesn't. I would argue maybe it doesn't handle as many themes as Ghost in the Shell, but the few that it does, it really takes its time.
It does, and I've heard a couple complaints that some of the pacing is a little slow. I mean, it does the same thing as Ghost did with a lot of the scenery porn, where it's just
Yeah,
massive visuals of this city in the background, and some of them don't necessarily make sense. Like, why is there flame spurts in the middle of, you
yeah.
know, the skyline? It kind
I
of creates a hazard for low flying aircraft.
yeah. But I mean, there's even just if we're talking about just the cityscape of Blade Runner, there's just so much going on. I mean, you have the sort of the difference between classes, where the lower classes live in these absolutely dismal, rundown, broken, in a way sometimes disgusting, environments, whereas the people who are considered like the social or the class elite live in these lavish places. And there's also just the sheer level of globalization, where there's that one guy, I think Gaff is his name or something, where he speaks like a weird mixture of, I think, like it's like Japanese, Korean, Creole, English, and like three other languages. At least that's what I was able
Yeah,
to
it's
gather
it's
from the little bit of, yeah.
Edward James almost created his own city speak,
Yeah.
as he called it, which apparently drove Ridley Scott nuts because he couldn't understand what he was saying.
Well, I like the fact that
Like,
I actually couldn't understand for the most part what he was saying. It
it was
made it
it was
feel.
kind of like what Benicio del Toro did with The Usual Suspects with his
Oh
character.
yeah.
Took kind of a one shot background character and made him memorable.
Oh. That that actually, now that you bring that up, that guy is pretty memorable.
Exactly. You remember him because of how he talks. I mean,
Yeah.
if he was just like some normal guy, he would have been a guy that gets, spoiler alert here, killed in the first half of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, my
But
God.
as it was, he took like old Edward here. He takes it and he makes it. He makes a character that is unique to this thing. They're talking with the food vendor,
Hmm.
and Deckard has to call him over to translate this other guy.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
I mean, that's great. It's like, what is he saying? He's saying you're under arrest.
Right. I mean, this whole other dialect that exists in this movie is great. And then, like you said, the globalization and the commercialization that has
Oh
happened
yeah.
with the giant billboards on the sides of these
Yeah.
buildings and everything. I mean, back then that was awe inspiring. Nowadays, it's
Now,
almost second
yeah.
nature. It's
Now
almost like
nowadays that's like Times Square. I mean,
Yeah,
if
they kind of almost predicted the future
yeah,
on how advertising was gonna go,
yeah, any
even though apparently there was a curse on that movie with the advertisement
I
since
read about
most of
that.
it
Like most
does
of
not
those, yeah,
exist anymore,
yeah,
and
most of those
Coca-Cola.
ads don't like they're all gone. Like they all either were sold off to other companies or they just went bankrupt.
I think Coca-Cola was the only one that managed to survive, and even that almost didn't,
Like yeah,
because it was after this movie that they introduced New Cola and
oh, New Coke, God,
that everybody hated. Yeah,
yeah.
and, nearly drove them into bankruptcy, but that's when the classic
Okay,
cola came back.
and then they made billions.
Right, and it all came back.
Yeah, and I mean, just truthfully, I mean, just knowing you and I, we could just talk about Blade Runner for about 5 hours and still, have plenty to talk about. But I love the fact that, like, if there was I mean, first of all, I mean, when you watch Blade Runner, you become keenly aware of just how much modern science fiction cinema and even just neo-noir in general not borrows from, but at least was clearly inspired by Blade Runner. I mean, when you see just these amazing shots of the cityscape and the emphasis sometimes on the extremities of the body, like the eyes especially, are a recurring theme throughout the entire thing. Like where somehow gauging the eye is when you're able to tell who's a human versus who's a replicant.
Yeah, this
Um,
movie is all about the eyes, and
yeah.
I think that's one thing that I love about that is that
Oh
theme.
yeah. It was great.
And
I mean, like
well,
watching this movie, I felt like I was like I've made me think of like, oh, I've seen this in Ghost in the Shell. I've seen this in Metropolis. I've seen this in I mean, okay, Metropolis is way before this, but
oh, it's good. Yeah,
yeah, I was about to
yeah.
say, but
It was
like,
interesting. I was just about to bring up that
yeah,
that this might have been one of the first like cyberpunk
yeah,
would be the genre that you could kind of put it
cyberpunk, yeah,
underneath. Other
yeah,
than Metropolis was probably one of the first, but then it pulls from a lot of German expressionism
yeah,
and Gothic architecture to create this thing, and
hmm
it was on the forefront of the genre
hmm
cyberpunk, right alongside the books, Neuromancer and Snow Crash
yeah,
were the two big books that did it. And actually, William Gibson, the guy that wrote Neuromancer, was in the middle of writing it when this came out, and he was really concerned that everybody was going to think that he was ripping off Blade Runner with that book, even though it was one of the, if not the first, cyberpunk novel.
yeah. I love this the I mean, because I'm such a huge fan of science fiction in general. I mean, I am an absolute lover of Star Trek, parts of Star Wars. Uh, you know,
I'll float you with that one. I am with both, and probably in the reverse, but
oh wait, reverse as in how?
I enjoy Star Wars more than Star Trek, but there are some Star Trek that I enjoy more than Star Wars.
Oh yeah, same, absolutely. Um, but it's 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 just one of those flicks where when you become so aware of just how much stuff later on was inspired by it, it just makes you appreciate it all the more. And the amazing thing is that when you reach that level of appreciation, you also somehow become so much more invested in what is transpiring. You somehow become much more willing to play along with its themes. Because even I mean, whether or not you end up liking the movie or not, which if you can't gauge by how we're discussing it, we both obviously love the final cut at the very least. The original, we yeah.
The director's cut is also very good. Skip the
Yeah,
original
just
version to even
just
help.
just just skip the original version. Simply put, don't even bother with the. If you see the
But
original, just
if
sneer at it.
other than for comparison purposes,
Yeah,
there's really no reason to watch the original theatrical. Go for the director's or the final cut in
yeah,
this one.
and it's funny because with all of the talk about like who were humans versus who are replicants, it's amazing that in a way the replicants are portrayed more as human characters than the actual humans.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
Like the
They're considered to be more emotionally stunted because they're younger,
yeah,
but they display more emotional, not so much maturity, but they explore more emotion than the
absolutely.
humans.
Yeah,
Like,
especially in regards to at least for a couple of them, especially in regards to photographs. Um I mean, Rachel especially. I mean, she carries around. She apparently cared enough to because the test that they gave her to determine whether she was a human or not or a replicant. I mean, she apparently was so affected by it that she wants to like bring a photograph with her as proof of like, no, these memories that I have are real. I lived these. I experienced these. Here, let me prove it to you. Which is also funny because uh, Rick's apartment is full of all of these pictures as well. Which I mean, I know that one of the eternal questions of the movie is Rick himself a human or is he a replicant? But it's amazing that photographs are used somehow as a means to define your humanity when it's called into question.
Between the photographs, the photography, and the eye motif
Yes.
that laces through this whole movie. Yeah, the photographs seem to be a way of people connecting to their humanity.
Yeah.
And when he gets a hold of Leon's photographs and uses them against him, it's almost like he's turning his own, turning the humanity against him,
Mm-hmm.
which also inspired a whole slew of enhance jokes for years to come
Yeah.
afterwards.
Oh
Since I think
God.
that was one of the first one to actually use the voice activated enhance function
Yeah. Jeez.
for it. But yeah, I love the way that this movie ties the eyes into everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, that's how they check to see if they're human. They're
Yeah.
almost looking at. They say the eye is the window to the soul,
Yeah. I mean,
and it essentially it's they're looking for a soul
mhm.
inside this person.
Yeah. I mean, even in I remember sitting watching like a TED talk or something. Like one of the ways that you determine whether someone is lying is based on what their eye is doing. Like if their eye is oddly fixated on you and you're the one being spoken to, that means in a way that you're being lied to because the eye as an organ just naturally wanders around. So for it to fixate on something so intently is a little unusual. Um, but I mean, just the way that the eye is held to this incredible standard of determining the existence of the soul. If you are a believer in the idea that humanity, that one of the intrinsic parts of humanity is that we have souls, uh, I just love how they incorporate it, like with the test, with the imagery, and just the. I honestly could go on for hours.
Well, it's like one of the first places these guys go. I mean, other than trying to infiltrate the actual company that built them, is they go to the street vendor, well, not vendor, but the manufacturer
Hmm.
of eyeballs,
Yeah,
and it's like their next step in order to find their soul is to go through the eyes.
yeah,
This is what they're doing. Their main function is to try to survive. They're looking for humanity, and they're looking for it in the eyes
absolutely.
of this thing. And it's interesting that um, the creator Tyrell
Yeah.
wears these giant glasses that are almost always reflecting away from his eyes.
Hmm.
That it almost, it's just this man that has created this thing, and he's almost soulless
I know. 'Cause that was
because you can never get a good sight of his
yeah,
eyes.
you can never get a good sight of his eyes and even just the sheer level of camera work that went into that to make it possible. I mean, having reflective glasses is one thing, but even when we get like more side profiles of him, it's always done just enough where it's like right at the brink where if he was just tilted one way a little bit more, we could see his eyes. But it never fully gets there. It's always kept at a bit of a distance, and I love
And
that.
it's interesting. The one time he has his glasses off is at the end when Roy
Yeah,
comes and confronts him,
yeah.
and that's how his method of execution
Mm-hmm.
is through the
Is
eyes.
through the eyes, and at that point, his eyes have been so destroyed because they've been so soaked with blood, and they're obviously broken. So if
Mhm.
we're
He's he's essentially he's destroyed his creator's soul. I mean,
in a
it's
way, yeah,
there. You've got a whole level of metaphor in there for
yeah.
for
Um,
human struggle to find. to find answers about the
Yeah.
afterlife
And if
and
we're
that kind of thing.
and if we're staying on the subject of Roy, we have to talk. We have to talk about that Tears in the Rain monologue.
You know, I'm gonna jump backwards for just a
Oh,
second
okay, yeah,
before
go
you
ahead.
do that.
Yeah.
We're gonna stay on Roy though,
Yeah.
but one of the interesting things I thought from the director's cut to the final cut
Yeah. Because you've seen the
was
director's cut. I haven't seen the director's cut.
they're very little. There's, as far as I can remember, there's really no alterations in terms of the dialogue or anything like that. Most of it's a visual aesthetic that gets upgraded. But here's where the one big change is when he
Okay.
walks in and he tells him he wants more life. And in the final cut, it's I want more life, father, which implies, this is the
Ah.
man's thing. In the director's cut and in the original theatrical cuts, it was a more antagonistic, I want more life, fucker.
Yeah.
And it changes the entire tone of the scene by one word. And
Yeah.
it's an interesting, you could write a whole thesis on that one
One.
word
Yeah.
alone, on how it changes from. I mean, he comes in and he's a very in the original cuts, it was a very antagonistic. He's coming where he's right in his face. This is
Yeah.
what I want. But in this one, when he says father, it's almost a little more sympathetic, and
Oh, yeah.
he's acknowledging his creator, and you can tell throughout the whole scene the sympathy on his face.
Mm-hmm.
The Tyrell almost feels bad for him that he cannot help him.
Yeah. I mean,
Turns and Roy, this ubermensch of
yeah.
a man,
He is
is
effectively a Nietzsche.
breaking
He is.
down.
Yeah. He is effectively a Nietzschean. Oh, wow.
Got that?
He is. You can't be an Ubermensch if you can't even speak. He is effectively a
Can't
Nietzschean.
say it.
He is
Yeah.
effectively a Nietzschean Ubermensch. He's intellectually and physically at the very least attained a level that the humanity by itself normally cannot attain, unless maybe you're Bjornsson who plays the Mountain on Game of Thrones. But I mean, and it's what I love is that it went from the word fucker to which I mean in our culture, I mean the word fuck is considered a particularly pointed and very taboo word to use in conversation. I mean, obviously it depends on the kind of company you're keeping, which you can clearly tell that we're great company. But but I mean, just to go from that to go to a word that has the the implication of nurturing, of learning, of one who helps you grow, of one who helps you learn and develop into your adulthood. I
It's a
mean,
very intimate
it's
word as opposed
like
to.
words like father and mother and lover. I mean, these are intimate words. Like you said, they're very intimate words. And the fact that they made that change in the final cut, again, because I haven't seen the two previous iterations, um, is such a marked difference. Because I mean, I would argue that the last 20 minutes of this movie really are about Roy. I mean, Rick is obviously the main vehicle of a lot of the detective work and a lot of the action, but the last 20 minutes are really about, Roy in his final in his basically at his death knell, trying one last time to either claim or cling to some semblance of humanity, and in a way, it makes it rather sad to watch.
It is. It's almost heartbreaking, and that's when he his last replicant that he had,
Yeah,
Priss,
Priss, yeah,
gets shot,
yeah, and
and you can see he breaks down next to her
oh
before he
yeah,
starts hunting Deckard again,
yeah. I mean,
and
he kisses
it's
her, he touches her blood. I mean, the guy is basically I mean, his body is literally breaking down, but I mean, emotionally, he's broken.
right. I mean, at this point, at that moment, Roy is at his most human,
Oh, absolutely.
and then Deckard has essentially taken that away from him,
Yeah,
and he turns animalistic.
Yeah,
You know,
literally
when
animalistic. When he
he
starts
starts
howling.
howling
Yeah,
and
howling.
chasing him,
Yeah.
and you know, and it certainly becomes interesting, and which leads up to his tears in the rain, which is probably one of the most famous you know, it's practically right up there with, like, you know, here's looking at you, kid, kind of
Yeah.
thing, or
It's funny, the audio actually cut out for a couple of seconds, so all I heard was, it's one of the most, like, amazing. And then it just froze.
oh no.
It looks like your monologue got cut off. I guess Skype was
but
just like, this is
but
no
what
tears in the rain.
no, we're not going with this. But yeah, you know, I was saying it's one of the most famous examples of it in cinema. Comparatively, you know, you put a top 20 list, and odds are it's probably on there somewhere.
Oh yeah, this was so
Uh,
beautiful to watch,
and
and
that he improvised most of it.
he did improvise most of that. That's the truly remarkable thing, because I didn't know that. I mean, that ranks up with, Take the Cannolis as one of my favorite improvised moments in movies.
Right. Yeah, I'd go with that one, or even like the "You're going to need a bigger boat," which
Yeah,
you know, the screenwriter said he would kill to be able to write a
yeah.
line like that at that
Or
moment.
was I could be wrong. Was De Niro's sequence in Taxi Driver, the "You looking at me"? Wasn't that improvised too?
That was almost wholly
I
improvised.
was about
Yeah,
to say, yeah.
it was. I think his writing directions were, he talks to himself, so he had to come up with the entire dialogue
well,
of
that
what
he
he's doing
Well,
to
that
it.
he did, and as Roy is delivering this beautiful monologue to Rick, who is clearly like going through a period of like, what the hell here, as like as effectively. Let me put it like this: as Roy is, because this is going to connect back again to what we were talking about, how the eyes are the door to the soul. Because as Roy is delivering this monologue and Rick is there listening to it, and Roy's body is just gradually failing him like more and more and more. When he's finally done, he says, "Time to die." His head falls down to the point where you can't even see his eyes. So in a way, it's almost like he laid his soul bare, and once that's happened, his eyes are no longer needed to be seen because you've seen the essence of his soul. He laid it out there for you. So this beautiful, stylistic shooting where again the like even from like the first frame where we see, the fire in the eye at the very beginning to the end where the eye is now like considered with tears and rain, so mixture of fire versus water. There's this movie is just operating on such a wonderfully complex intellectual level.
It does, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying there about his Roy being intellectually elite. Like at one
Yeah,
point, he starts when he walks into the eye doctor,
yeah,
and he goes for the fiery the angels fell,
mm-hmm,
which is a bastardization a poem that I don't recall who it was. It might have been Blake, um, but he knows, he's well read, well versed, and then you have,
yeah,
he mentions the Tannhausen Gate, which
yeah,
is also
mm-hmm. The old
literature.
the old Germanic legend of Tannhäuser and the legendary musician.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Well,
He's
I
obviously more read than I was.
I've I've seen Wagner's 6-hour Tannhäuser opera, so I know Tannhäuser decently well.
So well, there you go. So you know, I mean, it shows that he's got these memories
Yeah,
built up that he's trying to pass on. He's trying to give some of his humanity to Deckard at his
yeah,
final moments, um, to for somebody to remember him.
yeah. And
Almost, it's
and
like,
what
you
is
know, as Tyrell told him, you know, is like the flame that burns twice as bright lasts half as long.
Yeah, and if one of the ideas behind human existence is to somehow leave some kind of impression so that what we did can be remembered. I mean, and you're talking about the idea of like of memory and planted memory. It's funny because this is one of the times where it's an organic planting of memory as opposed to a synthetic one. Because
You
beforehand,
know, I
like,
didn't even think about that,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's
I
a
mean,
good
because
point.
yeah,
It's
you've got the when the replicants are made, they're given these false memories to give them the false sense that they have led this long life from infancy to the point when they die 4 years after their creation. But it's amazing that the synthetic man, in his moments of like effectively dying or being retired, if you will, if you want to use the movie's terminology, for
right.
him
They
to
never
do.
actually tell him that they kill him. It's a
Yeah,
retirement.
yeah, it's a
It's one of those
retirement. Yeah.
unusual euphemisms for death.
It's a great choice of a word.
And I
It's
love that it kind of shows off that um the humans, the actual full humans, do not consider these replicants to be human.
Yeah,
To them, they're just a piece of technology. Like you would retire a model, a model of car
yeah.
or something like that. Or last year's model got retired.
hmm
You don't execute
Yeah,
last
something.
year's
Yeah,
model.
yeah. Retirement
It's
implies that something has fulfilled its use and then it's not needed anymore. To the point where it's just like sent in a way to the metaphorical junkyard or literal junkyard if we're talking about cars.
right.
Yeah, but it's just such a. I just love that last little, you know, play between the organic versus the synthetic in regards to the planting of memory. Because whether or not Dick is an actual human or a replicant, uh, you can't deny the fact that it left an impression. And I mean, so in a way, Roy was arguably the most human character in the entire movie.
Oh, absolutely. I would.
Yeah,
I would. I wouldn't even
yeah,
argue with that. And it
yeah,
it it shows how much he's um, pushed Deckard to question his own morality
yeah,
and on things when he runs off with Rachel at the end. They he knows, and even Gaff tells him, she's not going to last.
last. But how many of us?
You
But
know,
nobody ever really does.
right? And it almost it shows him like, enjoy your life for what it is. Don't waste it
Yeah,
on things. He's spent his life. If you take him for being human, he's
yeah,
obviously had a career as a Blade Runner before this when he gets pulled back out of retirement. So
yeah,
this is what he did. He essentially hunted down these things
yeah.
for his lifetime and then has decided to stop
Yep.
and gets pulled back into it. And his last mission is to fight one that shows him that does show him his own humanity and in terms of, are you really living?
It was just so that, like I said, you and I can talk about this movie for hours. We really could. I mean, because here's the thing. Because much like Ghost in the Shell, Blade Runner is, just for those listening who are curious, Blade Runner is not a movie that I would consider one that you would watch casually. It's not the kind of flick where you think, oh, I'm gonna watch Blade Runner. It's like, no, I'm gonna sit down and I'm going to watch Blade Runner. At
It's
least that's
almost academic.
yeah.
It-
It is quite academic, I would say.
it's definitely become a cult classic,
Yeah.
but it's one of those well-known cult classics, and it's kind of like almost like a Citizen Kane, where everybody knows it, and
Yeah.
it spawned some memes for various different things, but not everybody has seen it.
Yeah.
They could
I
probably tell you what it is, like, oh yeah, no, this guy goes and hunts a bunch of androids or something,
yeah.
but how much of its soul have
Yeah.
you explored?
I would put it this way. I would not go so far as to say that like Blade Runner is in my top 50. I mean, I don't really even keep a top 50 of sorts. I have a list of favorite movies with one at the very top. But aside from
Which
that,
I
it's
think we
just
just mentioned.
yeah, it's just like a very general sorting of and whatnot. But I will say that if I had to choose, like 10 movies that I would implore people to watch, whether they like the genre or not, I would pick Blade Runner: The Final Cut.
I would do the same. This is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah,
If I had a top 50 list, this would probably crack the top 10
yeah.
in terms of my favorite movies. And I've watched this all, back. The first version I saw of this was actually the original director's cut.
Oh,
And
okay.
I had it far enough back that it was on VHS.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the first ones that I'd seen that was on widescreen. This back VHS was mostly pan and scan. So
Oh,
you
pan
got
scans. Oh,
you got that full visual effect, and
yeah.
it was such a beautiful film that I was just immediately sucked into the genre,
Yeah.
the cyberpunk, the noir genre. I
Mm-hmm.
just I after that point I'm just eating it up. I love that particular. It's the very cynical protagonist against. You've got the femme fatales in this one. You've got
Yeah.
the intellectual adversary
Mm-hmm.
that he's going up against.
Yeah. You have.
So it really does fulfill a lot of the old like noir detective movies
Yeah.
and that kind of thing, and updates them to as you said, the neo noir.
Yeah. I mean, this. I mean, Blade Runner is arguably the, at least, I would say is maybe at least of recent movie history. I'd say is like the first real neo noir, just with the as science, or at least in science fiction.
I would agree. I can't think of too many of really anything that came before it, but
Yeah.
since it's come out, there's been many that have aped it.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm truly not making this up. If you watch Blade Runner and then you watch some other science fiction, you will become keenly aware of just the sheer level of either homage or inspiration that Blade Runner had for science fiction. It's everywhere, and it's great. Like this is a great movie.
Agreed. And speaking of movies that have been inspired by it,
Absolutely.
let's
Let's dive
let's
into our last one.
segue into this one. And something we didn't exactly bring up in the Blade Runner one is that it was originally based on a short story by Philip K. Dick.
Yep.
All
Yeah.
right,
So, all right, hang on just 1 minute.
all right.
Okay. So, I'm good to go. So, do you want me to just give like a quick little clarification as to what the hell happened?
Uh, no, yeah, well, maybe I
Well, I
don't
mean,
know.
we probably should, considering what just happened.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so
not going to be a really seamless edit,
yeah.
but we
Oh,
could,
of
yeah,
course.
we could.
Yeah, of course not. It's not going to be a seamless edit. Well, that's what happens. So, for those of you listening and are wondering just what on earth is going on, Skype just randomly decided to drop the call because Skype is evil.
It's
It
terrible evil.
it really is. So,
Evil corporations. This is the
yeah.
theme of cyberpunk. It's
Yeah.
it's the little man against the giant corporations that
Oh
are
my
just
god.
pressing everything.
You know what the sad thing is? This would happen to us on and now I have a phone call. Who is calling me right now? It's an 866 number. You know what? I'm not paying attention.
No, that's probably the Red Cross, right? They
uh,
want your
well,
blood.
because I mean, I do have Grubhub coming in about 50 minutes, but I don't understand why I'm getting an 800 number call right now. But anyway, I'll take if they call again, I'll stop the recording again, and then we'll have to do this again. But oh well, whatever. Anyway, so so
So
this is off to a smashing get back on track. But as
so
you
we
were
had a
saying,
smooth transition here. We almost had a smooth transition.
about as
Um,
smooth as our
Blade.
transition between Death Note and Jupiter Ascending.
No, that was worse. That was so much worse.
Yeah. Oh my god.
But so as I was saying, Blade Runner was based on a short story by Philip K. Dick,
Yeah.
a well-known sci-fi author who had a lot of cerebral sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
And his short story, "Do Androids Dream
Dream
of
of
Electric,"
Electric Sheep. It's also just a
was
great name.
right though,
Yeah, seriously.
which um, that was the basis for Blade Runner. And somehow inadvertently we picked a second one of his books that had been transitioned into a movie,
Mm-hmm.
Minority Report,
That is right. And
which
we did
is
not
one of
plan
those.
this. We didn't
Is
plan to do like a Philip K. We didn't plan to do a Philip K. Dick uh, episode. We
we
just
did
picked.
we
We
almost
need.
did when I almost realized that we were having one, and
Yeah.
tried to insist on Total Recall being thrown into here,
Yeah.
but
Oh, that's why you insisted on Total Recall. I didn't know that was the reason.
Yeah, he would have been the third Philip K. Dick
Oh, okay.
instead of Ghost in the Shell. But
why have two dicks when you can have three?
exactly. But we still stuck with the cyberpunk,
Yep.
neo noir sort of theme for the night anyway, which still
Hmm.
works just as well.
Yeah, just as well.
Because that was a lot of what Philip K. Dick did.
Yeah.
It just sounds funny to say
Yeah.
that. So anyway, Minority Report. This was a collaboration between Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg,
Hmm.
which resulted in one of um, their most financially successful and best reviewed films. Um,
Of at least the early 2000s.
yes, this is probably one of not Spielberg's early forays into sci-fi. I mean, he's
No,
he's
I mean
he's
he.
definitely dipped into that well more than
Yeah, I mean like
E.T.
Close
and
Encounters of the Third
Close
Kind.
Encounters.
Yeah.
But it was his first foray into the neo noir
Yeah. Definitely.
aesthetic.
Definitely.
And this movie also had a very strong um, recurring themes of eyes
Yes, it did.
and running
Hmm.
between the two of them, and not because Tom Cruise is known for running,
Although
which
he is
which, which they did manage to get him to do
a lot in
within the
this.
first 5 minutes of the film.
They they succeeded. Like
And then
pointedly,
they
they
continued.
succeeded.
But this was one of the first times where it became plot relevant that it was a theme of this movie. I mean, this
Yeah.
is the first one. Just about every Tom Cruise movie, you can almost count on him running, riding a motorcycle, or possibly a combination of the two of them.
Yep.
Which he didn't exactly have a motorcycle in this one,
Hmm.
but he came really close when he was riding these automated cars that only had two wheels. So
Yeah. Seriously though.
so we still kept it in the Tom Cruise running theme,
Yeah.
but so this movie, I took notes on all three of these things. This is the one that I wound up with the most amount of notes for because of the three movies we've discussed so far, or well, the two that we've discussed.
At
To
length.
me, it's a very solid movie. It's very well crafted. It's also one of the most disjointed
Thank you.
movies.
Thank you so much. Because Minority Report is one of those, because I'm not really a I don't like follow Spielberg as closely as maybe some more film aficionado like people do. I mean, I obviously like Spielberg a lot. I mean, I love E.T. I love um
Jaws. I'm
Jaws.
going to
Thank
put
you.
Jaws out there. That
I
is
love Jaws.
one of my favorite horror movies.
Yeah, I love that. But I don't like quote unquote follow Spielberg. So, but Minority Report was one that I knew had a particular reputation within Spielberg's gamut or Spielberg's canon of film. And as I'm sitting there watching it, I'm constantly thinking to myself, this is like aesthetically, it's pretty good. Acting wise, it's pretty good, but it's kind of in a way just going sort of all over the place.
It really does. It's one of those films where it's the aesthetics for it. The scenes are very. It's kind of that utopian
Yeah,
feel
like
to it.
everything is
They're very
glossy,
well
everything
lit.
is
Everything is
yeah.
white. It's very brightly lit.
Yep.
It's the classic cyberpunk idea of the utopia is
Yeah.
hiding something darker by being
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
pretty,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word.
within the pristine there is the dark.
Yes,
Yeah.
and which shows which he does pull off very well in this
He
because
does.
they're they've got the scenes where most of it is in these very well lit areas and things like
Mhm.
that, but then he goes into the sprawl as they call it at one point,
Yeah.
which is dark alleys. It doesn't have the cameras that everywhere else has.
Yeah.
And the guy that's, the king of the underworld
Yeah.
has blinded himself
Yeah.
to get away from the constant monitoring
Yeah.
of the utopian government,
Yeah.
which
It.
again fits with the eye motif of this movie. That
Yeah.
everything's about what do you, the precog. She says over and over, "Do you see?
See.
Do you see?"
Can
This is
you
a movie
see?
about
Yeah.
yeah. This is a movie that is all about what are you looking at.
Yeah.
Is a very visual
Yeah.
movie.
Like, what are you looking at? And because of that, what do you believe? What do you think? I mean, this in a way strikes me as basically a sort of re-envisioning of the thought police from Orwell's 1984. I mean, even down to the idea of like the pre-crime unit where you imprison people before they actually commit crimes.
Right.
Yeah,
And this was actually written before 19. Well, I'm not sure if it was before.
1984 was written in 1948. That's how I remember the date.
Oh, okay. So yeah, no, this would be after 84. I thought that for some reason I was thinking 84 was written somewhere in the 60s, but
Oh,
this would have
okay.
been written in the 60s. So
Yeah.
yeah, he could have Dick could have very well pulled a lot of the ideas from that. And it does. It fits with the utopian ideal that there's an
Hmm.
oppressive government that's there's the seedy underbelly
Yeah.
of society.
Hmm. Just and I mean again, and this is one of the reasons why I thought of Blade Runner, because you have that clash between the pristinity of the high class and the more globalization and also just grittier tone of the lower class. I mean, the guy who performs the eye operation. I mean, like his accomplice is, I mean, speaking German, or at least that's what I think it was. And it's
Again,
and
this is
it's just
speaking
funny
with the
because
disjointed nature of this movie.
yeah.
But yeah, no, that's another thing with the like Blade Runner. It kind of had the I for the term I've heard is advent overloaded
Yeah.
future.
Okay.
There's everywhere they go that they're constantly being bombarded with advertisements. It took Blade Runner's idea of everywhere you look
Just add
there's an advertisement for something, and it
it
took it to the
this
next the
level.
next logical step that is beaming them directly personified to you. And I guess it almost in a way it predicted the Google Facebook
It yeah.
sort of
That's what
sort
I
of
was
thing
thinking, and
where
also just how now there are advertisements everywhere, and because the way that they generate ads is based on your search history, it really did predict this kind of like you said, personal to you or completely unique set of ads based on your tastes and your liking. I mean, like the when he walks into the Gap, I think it was, after he gets his eye operation, like the Gap lady, the holographic Gap lady, even says, like, how did those tank tops work out for you? Like,
exactly, yeah,
it's
it remembers the user preference.
yeah, it's so creepy.
It is, and it's weirdly predictive. What looking back on it now,
Yeah.
of how much of this thing, it kind of we haven't exactly progressed to the same level of holographic display,
No, but
but the iPhones and iPads are really close to it at this point.
they really are. I mean, it's see, because the thing that Minority Report, Blade Runner, and Ghost in the Shell all had that really got me thinking during the course of just all of this is the fact that one of the reasons why neo-noir is sometimes so unsettling and why neo-noir tends to do thrillers decently well is because in some capacity they're all rooted in some semblance of truth. Because
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, because I mean technology is not a technology if we define it, as like the computer or the phone or like the television or like those kinds of advertisements. I mean, technology is not going anywhere. It's not going to be going anywhere for hundreds and hundreds of years. But it's the fact that it's the thought of what can technology do now that makes it such an interesting and sometimes so uncomfortable subject.
A lot of cyberpunk genre, the
Yeah.
neo noir
Yeah.
cyberpunk genre, it does deal with a lot of politics,
Mhm.
and it has a lot of class struggle in a
Mhm.
lot of it. So it really does ground itself in a reality that some other science and even speculative fictions that they kind of stray away from, because it's being written with that in mind in
Yeah.
order to bring that uncomfortableness to the surface, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to leaving it, hey, there might be something there. This kind of puts it in your face.
Yes, it
Even
does.
if it's not putting it directly in your face,
Face.
it's there and you
Yeah.
have to look at it.
And we're not talking about directly in your face like cheap 3D movies. We're talking like in your face as in like thematically. Like
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
If really it really
it brings the disturbing to the
yeah.
forefront.
It forces you to wrestle with something that you'd probably be happier not thinking about too much.
Right.
If we had to put it another way. Yeah.
And another thing this particular film does that it does well is how much are you in control of your own
Destiny,
place
yeah.
in society? Yeah,
Yeah.
and your own destiny and everything. Is it, how much of it is predetermined
Mhm.
by these actions? And this is a movie with a lot of moral choices
Yeah.
being made, and it brings to the forefront exactly what is moral and how far are you willing to go
Yeah.
to preserve the illusion of
Mhm.
morality.
Yeah. Like I mean even just the idea of, like so for those of you who sort of are kind of in the dark about what this movie is about, there's a unit of the government called pre-crime which arrests people before they commit crimes, and they put them in this kind of dreamlike state where they're basically perpetually in a place where they feel like pleasant or content. Think of it kind of like the Nexus from Star Trek Generations, where you're not where you're sort of whatever your heart desires, or at least that's what they tell you. At the very least, that's what they tell you. Um, but I mean, it does beg the moral quandary. Like, is it considered more moral to stop somebody before they actually physically do something wrong, versus letting the bad thing happen and then punishing them?
Right, because either way, they are ending up punishing them
Yeah, it all
for
leads to the
this
same
crime. They're
conclusion.
putting them in a state of suspended animation. It almost is like a very matrixy
Yeah,
type thing. And
yeah,
oddly enough,
it's like stasis.
it reminded me of Tom Cruise's other film, Vanilla Sky.
Oh
Um,
wow, that's one I haven't seen in a while.
that he's in a dreamlike state and he starts questioning his realities,
Mm-hmm.
which oddly enough, this came out just after Vanilla Sky, and if you watch closely enough, Cameron Diaz does have a blink and you'll miss it cameo in that movie. She's on the subway with him when he's getting away, and there's a guy with a newspaper. He kind of glances up and he recognizes him as his picture directly seated behind him is Cameron Diaz
I love that. That's great.
sitting there. So yeah, they kind of did that on purpose. But there is a little bit of a theme there. And one thing I like about Philip K. Dick's movies the movies that have been made about his stories, and a lot of the things about him are they've almost displaced the books. Like they're more well known than his
Yeah,
books
that's true.
because
Because more people have heard of Blade Runner than do androids dream of electric sheep.
right, and a lot of more people have heard of Total Recall. You had the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger. You had the remake with Colin Farrell, who
Yeah.
is also in this movie. So he's managed, he's kind of a staple of Phillips' works now.
Yep.
But it's one of those movies where there's a point where you can start questioning whether or not the movie is continually showing you the reality, or if the movie is sort of taking a left turn
Yeah.
into an unreal
Yeah.
situation.
And that's,
Um,
interestingly enough, one of the biggest beefs I had with this movie was actually its ending. Because I thought to myself, if there is one point where the movie can really take that idea and do like shock the audience with it, a la Brazil, it was in the it was in the ending, because the way the whole thing resolves itself feels so like contrived with how happy it is.
Very happy ending for this kind of.
It is an infuriatingly happy ending for a movie that is
It's almost
not happy at all.
it's almost like the forest, driving off at the end
It
of the
that
original
is
kind of Blade Runner.
exactly
It's
what I thought of. It is the driving off the
get it? You get it? Get it? There's a
yeah,
moment where Tom Cruise's wife or ex-wife
yeah,
in this movie is talking to the head of pre-crime, the guy that helped invent it,
yeah,
Burgess.
Burgess, I think, yeah.
I believe his name was, and there's this is after he's been captured, and put into the stasis,
Yes.
and they're talking, and it's a moment of choice for her
Oh yeah.
because she realizes, he's talking with her, and he says he's going to look into this Anne Lively, who he's vehemently denied knowing,
Yeah.
and he says he's like, I'll check into how she drowned
When she
or
was,
something like,
yeah,
yeah,
which
something about being drowned, and she's like, she says to him, she's like,
like I never said, yeah, I
I
never
never
said
said
that she
that,
drowned.
so the whole, I never said it was poison, or
Yeah.
but there's a moment there where the cinematography pans around Burgess's head,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this blinding lens flare
Oh
on,
yeah.
and this
Oh
moment
yeah.
of almost like the way a movie would fade to white in a dreamlike sequence
Mm-hmm.
without fading out of the shot, and it's a moment where it can diverge right there.
Yes.
Is this the point where where Tom Cruise's character's fantasy begins,
Ends.
that he's getting
Yeah.
a happy ending out of this,
Mm-hmm.
or is he still in this? Is he still in this stasis pod
Yeah.
and dreaming this? And his wife
Mm-hmm.
is, she's really essentially she's a powerless character.
She is a very powerless character in this movie.
She doesn't. There's no point in this
I mean,
that at least
yeah.
on screen where he hands her his eyeball, which
Yeah.
comes up later.
Yeah,
It's
and
this,
I'm like, where the hell did she get that?
that was it. One of the first times I saw this, I just kind of like rolled with it, and watching it this time, I was like, there's no moment where he is with her
Yeah.
to hand her that. He pulls.
Yeah, nor any real moment when he implies that he has his old eyes to her.
Right. I mean, first he loses one,
Yeah, he
and
loses
then the
one.
other one is, he puts it in the baggie, and from
Yeah.
there he's on the run,
Yeah.
right up into the point where he gets to the house, and they're talking with the Agatha,
Yeah.
and he's breaking down and crying from her listening, telling him what his son would have been like,
Mm-hmm.
and the two of them are crying, and then all of a sudden, pre-crime shows up, and it cuts outside for a second where shows them swarming in,
Mm-hmm.
but he's running in that moment. At that point, does he say, "Here, take my eyeball"?
No, he doesn't say that at
You-
all. I mean, first
there's
of all,
there's
what
no
would you take
clear
some?
moment
Would
of him handing that to her, and it's this point of contention
yeah.
with me for this film but it's also a good sign of, maybe this is the fantasy, maybe it's not the happy ending, maybe it is more a la Brazil, another brilliant film, dystopian film,
Yeah, because I mean the way that Brazil,
but
yeah,
they never follow through with that.
yeah, because the way that Brazil ends, I mean, it again involves this notion of trying to run away from the bureaucracy or the oppressive like idea of police, and it does, and I mean Brazil does such a brilliant job of doing all these fake outs, where like you think he did and then he didn't, and then he tries again and you think he did, but he didn't, and I'm like, okay, so he's in the fantasy chamber, we'll call it. It's like, so I'm wondering, like, when is the moment where like maybe fantasy and reality is going to clash, because you can't, because I keep thinking to myself that you can't have this idea of like the prisoners being so well taken care of through this sort of stasis that they're put into, and then not really develop it, because the fact that he's apparently so afraid of it is clearly means that it holds a lot of value of some kind, but they don't really, I felt like they never really took it as far as they could go with it, you know what I mean?
Right. No, it's got it. Yeah, it's kind of like a cryostasis freezer. Like, what? Why would it be frightening to have this machine that essentially lives out your fantasy?
Yeah.
Like I say, it's kind of a very matrixy sort of idea, and perhaps this is, you could almost tie it into the Matrix that way. Like,
Yeah,
maybe,
you
hey,
could.
this is how the Matrix began. The fantasy inside this reality is that everything is the machines took over, and now you're fighting this regime of machines while you're inside
The
another machine.
machine.
And yeah, the rabbit hole just goes
Machineception.
the rabbit hole can go really deep with this one.
Absolutely. Yes, it can.
Um,
And it just irked me so much that they didn't. And I mean, in talking about this, we hope we're not conveying that we didn't like this movie, because we did like this movie. I mean,
it is very
yeah.
enjoyable,
Yeah,
but as you say, it is a little disjointed, especially in
yeah.
some of its ideas and its tone.
Its ideas, its tones, and its ideas of plot progression about like
Um,
what's pushing everything forward. Like the scene where he's talking to that old recording of his son, and he's sort of
it's supposed to be. I
it's
feel it's kind
supposed
of like a humanizing moment,
yeah.
and you understand his connection with his loss of his son.
Yeah, you do. But
But at the same time, yeah,
like
it's
it's
him telling him how to run, and I'm like, oh my god, it's Tom Cruise trying to teach us
yeah.
how to run
And I'm like,
faster, like Tom Cruise.
if that's not a if that's not like a self-referential treatment, I
I
don't know what is. But what really struck me about that scene, just to sort of supplement the disjointed idea, was, you're having this moment which is obviously trying to build up, like you said, his relationship with his family and whatnot. And as he's talking to it, he talks in this, what I would say, like almost like pseudo pedophilic fashion, where he's like, yeah, like,
Well, you got to remember at that
yeah,
point
I
he's
know.
high as a kite,
I know he's high as a kite. It just came
and
across as
he's having these,
it just
yeah,
it
he's
just
having
came
these memory.
it came across as just unintentionally funny. It
I, I can understand that, but at the same time, it didn't feel that way to me, but
yeah,
perhaps it's just me as a father. I can understand the tone.
yeah,
Like he's this is his one moment with his son. He can
yeah.
relive,
That he can relive over and over again, save for
and
like
it's
his son's.
he
Yeah,
wants to be proud of his son,
yeah,
and he's heard the lines so many times,
yeah,
him saying them over and over. He's following the script
yeah.
kind of thing,
Also,
and
props to them for actually getting a pretty decent child actor to play the kid. I will say
right.
that was actually not that bad.
Right, it was not Dakota Fanning in War of the
No.
Worlds, which
Hushabye Mountain.
which if I never have to watch that movie again,
Yeah.
it'd be too soon.
I remember liking it when it came out in theaters, and I watched it like a year later. I'm thinking to myself, why did I like this?
I remember the first time I watched it with my cousin who had seen it prior
Oh
and
wow,
said
okay.
that all she does is scream in this movie. So I that was all I focused on, and I'm
Not
like, this
inaccurate.
it's really it was not, and it was too much at that point.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of other things like being disjointed to this movie, there was a lot of moments in this where for a dark sort of dystopian story, had a lot of very light comedic
Yeah.
moments to it.
The
Like they
the
were kind of put in to try to lighten the mood
and
from
it
it being a very heavy Blade Runner esque
and it didn't
type of
work.
film,
It didn't
but
work.
they felt so out of place. Like what really didn't sell the scenes for me was the musical score for
Yeah.
this had this very bombastic
Yeah.
chase scene esque
And
sort of music to it, where you really could have put something along the lines of like the Benny Hill or the
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
I forget what his the musical thing was, but yeah,
And
it was kind of like a
yeah,
circusy feel
or
to it
for
for
when
most
he's
of it.
when we're getting used to the idea of like using the pre-crime unit to determine like where it's all taking place, and they're playing. And can you tell I'm a music major when they're playing Schubert 8 with like la da 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 da? It's like
Like
this is
he's
like
conducting a symphony while
I'm
he's
like
looking
this is
through
the
this thing.
this is the happiest go lucky music for talking about a murder that's about to take place. Like what is going on here? Like the
It was a little bit of soundtrack dissonance, but I
yeah,
think what
wild dissonance
more,
sometimes. Yeah.
where it was two scenes really in particular was um when they first try to catch up with him after he's gone on the run,
Oh yeah.
and they've got all the jetpacks,
Mhm.
and he's fighting through this building, and they're crashing through all these different apartments, and there's the kid playing the saxophone, there's the family eating dinner, and they
Oh
move out
my
of the way
god.
of the table before they go bursting through the thing. And it was just this like it was almost like slapstick.
It was slapstick.
It wouldn't have been out of place in like a Three Stooges movie,
Yeah. And
but
like
it's stuck in the middle of this
yeah.
dystopian,
Oh, and
oppressive movie, and
and
it's like,
yeah, and in the room with the kid with the saxophone, and then the cop is like, "You have the right to remain silent." Like clearly
yeah,
dazed from all the crashing, he's just like, "Go to sleep," and then he just walks out like nothing, like it wasn't that big of a deal.
right,
It's like
and then you had later when he's chasing the eyeballs down.
even just
So,
like
well,
chasing the eyeballs.
there's no other way to put it. I
There is
mean,
no other way to put it.
it really, again, you could have the same kind of Circus Olay kind of music. I mean,
Yeah,
and they've got this tense thriller music going on in the background, and it doesn't fit the
it does
scene
not at
for it.
all. It does not. See, because
And then and then you have Peter Straumore, who I will never complain about a film that this man is
oh,
in,
of
because this
course,
guy
he's
plays
amazing. He's
he
amazing.
he's not ever a lead character, but
Yeah,
he
he's never the
steals
lead, but
every scene he's in.
you cannot take your eyes or your ears off of him when he is on the screen.
He's
He is
used
a he
magnificently
is
here
a
as this
he is a
back alley,
magnet.
yeah, as this back alley doctor for these illegal eyeball transplants. Who, I love the way he banters with Cruz a little
Yeah,
bit in this when he's trying to get him to remember who he was.
yeah,
And he's like, Baltimore, yeah, I remember you dealt with burn victims. You lit your patients on
on
fire.
fire.
They Strommore's like, I put them out eventually. You know, it's like he's still this sociopath on this guy,
Oh
and
God,
and
it's just so fucking amazing.
but it still fit with the theme of this. It was
Yeah,
a
like it
weird.
really
It
did.
was disjointed a little bit, but then the part that really killed me was the refrigerator.
Yeah.
There
Oh,
was
the
no
fridge, and the playing of the
there's no
cops
reason,
theme.
unless this is an apartment that they're more or less squatting in to do this illegal eye transplant.
Yeah,
Why would you keep your fridge stocked like that? I
yeah.
mean,
Why
the
would you have that?
rancid milk
And
and
the
sandwich
sandwich.
in there have been in there for longer than probably either of those actors had been alive.
Pro- Probably because because I mean I thought that was bad enough, but then like when they start playing the cops theme
Oh
in
my
the
god,
middle of
yeah,
it,
no, I got that
I
right in the
I
notes. I'm like,
I was laughing, and I'm thinking to myself like I shouldn't be laughing at this because it goes it's just a classic case of movie tone dissonance happening way too often.
it really was, yeah.
Yeah, which is funny
But
because as even though it's the most recent movie that we watched of these three, because this is the only one that was made post 2000s of the ones we saw here, I would actually argue Minority Report has aged the poorest.
I would say, yeah, in terms of a milestone movie. This it was a very good movie,
Yeah,
but it's nothing that didn't break new ground in terms of anything.
it
At
really
the
didn't. No,
time, it was visually on the cutting edge. It was beautiful,
absolutely, absolutely.
but a lot of it's it a lot of it was working on the backbone of a lot of things that have come before it. It was kind of like a 2001 crossed Blade Runner aesthetic. It had the
Yeah,
very white, glowing utopia like 2001, or even Kubrick's other film, Clockwork Orange.
oh yeah, hmm
Um,
love
but
both of
then,
those.
you had the Blade Runner esque kind of like underground,
Hmm
dirty
Like
city belly.
yeah, the underbelly is the word I was gonna use.
Yes, thank you. That was the word I was actually looking
Yeah,
for.
city belly. We don't want none of that there city bellies here coming into our town.
The town. It's like a giant man that fell over, and we're
Yeah.
crushed underneath him. One thing I did notice about this film, that kind of I liked that it kept um a sort of running theme through the middle of Phillips, back to his this is a Philip K. Dick thing.
Yeah.
The same as Total Recall. They had the advertisements for the main um, program that was
Oh
ever
yeah, yeah, like
like
the
this had the the news report
oh yeah,
about the pre-crime unit going into Washington, whereas like Total Recall had the advertisements for recall and things. It was kind of almost like a little bit of a satirical news report thing. It
yeah,
reminded me a bit of like Paul Verhoeven's other works that
hmm
he'll stick that kind of thing in there, and it tied the two of them together a bit, which considering that the two of them were, I believe, originally in the same universe in his works, it makes sense.
yeah,
So, but one thing I will say about this movie that I did like is some of the subtle actings
yeah,
that this movie portrays, because it does deal with the eyes a lot. So you get a lot of very close ups in this movie. You get a lot
hmm
of the medium shots with everybody,
yeah,
and I think my one of my favorite moments of nonverbal acting in this movie is um, when Colin Farrell's character, the Danny,
yeah,
confronts um, Tom Cruise in the elevator just after he finds out he's been doping.
yeah. Oh yeah,
And
that was great. That was a great sequence.
he's telling him, and Cruise pulls his gun on him.
Yeah,
He's got it right on everything. He's like, you're not gonna kill me. He's like, yeah, why not? He's like, well, there's no alarms going off. And in that moment, the alarm goes off,
yeah.
and the look on Colin Farrell's face sells the entire
It
scene. And
totally did. It
say
totally
what
did.
you will about the man as an actor, good or
Yeah,
bad or whatever,
yeah,
he sells the hell out of that very moment. That look on that, where he's like, I could
yeah.
be a dead man right here. This
Yeah,
is,
that was so great. That was so great. Because at that point, Tom Cruise really doesn't have that much to lose. So, I mean, for all he knows, he could have literally just, shot him right in the face.
right.
It's,
Farrell at this point, Farrell does not know about, or Danny, I guess,
yeah,
doesn't know that he's just been redballed for murder.
yeah.
He thinks he's getting him on this, illegal drugs charge, and hey, we're going to dismantle pre-crime like this, and he's like, oh, you're not going to kill me. There's no things for that, and then the alarm goes off,
Yeah,
and
and then the
it's the
alarm goes off.
murder alarm.
Yeah,
Because this is the only thing that pre-crime deals with is
yeah, it's
murder.
murders, yeah.
So when this alarm goes off, it's, hey, there's somebody about to commit a murder. He's staring down the barrel of a gun, you know. And
Yeah.
the only thing I'm just really glad they didn't keep with the tone, the other lighthearted tones, and have him wet himself or something.
Oh, yeah,
So
God.
he at least kept his professionalism through the oh crap moment.
Yeah. So, yeah, because I remember that moment especially is like the one that you literally just talked about for like the past 3 minutes. That was a moment when I was like, this movie is like when it's good. Because let me summarize it like this: when Minority Report is good, it's quite good, but when it's disjointed, it's really disjointed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, no, I will give you that.
yeah,
And I think some of the best, the most tense scenes are actually when Farrell's character is in the movie. He seems to ground it in the more
yeah.
uh, reality
The
of
yeah
the situation. He's
he
kind of,
he's
he's
sort of
almost presented as the villain
yeah
when he's
he's
first on scene. He comes in
mhm,
suave and everything. He's
yeah
he's strutting in like, hey, I'm the FBI guy. I'm obviously the mole. I'm going to be the bad guy in this movie. Blah blah blah.
blah, and then it turns out
And
later on he becomes actually Tom Cruise's advocate, which
right, he
is
starts figuring out that everything isn't as he seems. He's kind of like the audience
yeah
surrogate for this movie.
he is
And
effectively the glue that tries to keep the cerebral compass in line. Uh,
it
which
does. It's
yeah
this movie's moral compass.
yeah he is this movie's moral and cerebral compass, which is why I found it my personal favorite moment is actually when he gets shot. Just because that's like when I realized, oh, okay, so now he's gone, and because of what happened in the plot, the pre-crime's not picking up on what just happened, and but then I realized, wait, since he's gone, what's gonna happen now? Because
At
And
that point, anything could
yeah, at
happen.
that point anything
Yeah,
could happen, which is
that's
why I was so interested in how the movie was going to end, and why I was so disappointed that the movie ended the way that it did.
right. It did. The pieces fell together for him very quickly
they
to get
they
him
did,
back out
yeah,
of. He was in. It could have had a great little backstory with his wife,
yeah,
um, picking up the threads and carrying it to its conclusion.
yeah.
But they didn't hire Tom Cruise to stick out the last third of the movie in a box,
No, they didn't.
so they had to get him back out almost more quickly than he went in
Yeah,
to the box,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it took him like an hour and a half to get into it, so they
which
had
was
to.
disappointing because the caretaker of the prison there was a
He was,
great little
yeah,
character in
he was
himself.
great. I mean, the organ playing dude,
Yeah,
and then when she
I
drops the
remember him from
when she
from
drops
Oh
the
Brother
eye,
Where
yeah,
Oh Brother Where Art Thou
that's where he's from. Yeah,
is where I remember him most from. He was a great one of the main characters in that, and he plays a great side character in
he
this,
does. He really does. I love
and
also
he's
just that same
it,
scene when she drops the eyeball on the organ.
yeah.
That was funny.
That was fairly his face. He's like, you're not supposed
Supposed
to
to
be
be
in
here.
here. You're not authorized.
Rized.
You know,
It's like I found a way.
he keeps that little like
Yeah,
hillbilly, you know, slow kind of prison
yeah.
guard,
I love that.
character.
Like you said, he was great. He was just another one of those side characters who, like, if he for whatever reason got his own spin-off story, I would watch it.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I guess like,
The other
yeah,
that sticks out for me for this one, I got to bring this one up though,
yeah,
is
please do.
is his escape from the cyber parlor with
Oh yeah,
Agatha.
yeah.
Um,
Like what
for
the
in terms of this movie it being disjointed, a
that?
lot of the other action set pieces, like I said, could be set to like a Looney Tunes soundtrack.
Yeah, they really
This one
could.
was a very tense, well thought out,
Yeah, I'm
um,
like this is
well placed set piece.
yeah, this is a brilliant use of her ability and his quick thinking that
Yes.
like it was that like that is a chase scene. A chase scene is one that like a really good chase scene is one where the characters really get to demonstrate what they're capable of without defaulting to the whole the main character is invincible idea. Because she makes the point of mentioning several times like, like this person will recognize your face or like this person, you need to bump into this person or you need to get this. And
Right.
because
That
she's
throw some
yeah,
change. And
because she is effectively the oracle of this whole thing, her precognition has a purpose. And this is one example where like the main character in your action scene has to actively rely on somebody else. And that's why I liked that a lot. Is because he wasn't if she wasn't there, like like
he'd have
uh,
been caught in like three
he would
seconds.
have been caught in like 3 seconds. I mean, because once he beats the initial swarm of cops who come after him, they realize that they really need to up their game, and they do. So
Oh yeah,
so he needs
and
to
and
really get on it, and he does but it's mostly thanks to her ability to keep him safe, which you
and I
can
li- I
read a
like
whole
they used her in that particular scene in that way because it gives her something to do and something to character. It gives her some character other than being this sort of living MacGuffin
yeah, she was
that they're
basically a
just
living MacGuffin.
it actually gives her something to do other than to look scared all the time that she's
Yeah,
out in this world
or
that she's
howling.
never seen before.
Yeah,
Essentially she's the fish out of water in this story, and he's dragging her, from place to place to unlock her memory
yeah,
of this thing. And it just in that one little scene, there's a lot of little stories too that
yeah,
just play out. Like there's this Asian woman that comes walking by, and she just touches her on the shoulder. She's like, "Don't go home. He knows."
yeah. Like
Or
wow,
what?
what?
you
Like
know,
wow.
that's just all of a sudden out of nowhere. It's like, okay, she's not just trying to read, Tom Cruise
She's
through
reading
this thing. She's reading everything.
everyone.
She
Yeah,
feels
everyone.
everything.
Which is part of the reason why I think she says in like the car in that one with like I don't want to see the future anymore.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a little bit of an early version of River Tam from
Hmm.
Firefly.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
where she's psychic and like mild precognitive abilities, and but the more alone she is, the more at peace.
Yeah.
And this particular scene shows just how much she feels everything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's
You
kind
know,
of like, for all intents and purposes, it's kind of like that one scene in The Man of Steel when young Clark Kent is hearing everyone's thoughts at once, and but the difference is that he actually can focus and not hear that stuff, but he has to be like helped in order to do it. Whereas she's sort of a light switch that you can't turn off.
right. Her most lucid moments are when
When
she's out in the middle of nowhere at
Yeah,
their farmhouse,
yep, and she doesn't
and
need
she
to
starts,
worry about anything.
telling her about their son,
Yeah,
and yeah, she's not scared
yeah.
anymore. She's
Well,
not. She's lucid.
well, except when she screams "run" in that ridiculously over the top fashion.
Well, she's. I mean, granted, you've got this person that's just woken up from
Yeah,
what is essentially a 25-year drug
drug
stopper.
drug trip. Yeah,
They've had no experience from other things. The only thing they've had experience with is dreaming murder.
yeah,
And how much screaming is probably going on in all those dreams about people screaming? There's a lot of emotion
yeah,
attached. So she's learned all of her emotions from murder scenes.
yeah. Which is pretty sad.
It's extremely
Yeah.
disturbing.
So because of that, she feels both extreme passion and extreme fear, and also extreme aggression.
Yes.
And you see all of that in her performance. I mean, the lady who played Agatha, I don't even remember her name, but she was I think maybe the best actor in the whole movie, just for being able to somehow convey all of this raw emotion so well.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely she conveyed um sort of an innocent like quality with a naive performance
Yeah.
for her for her
Absolutely.
character.
Hmm.
Oh, it's
Absolutely. So, any final thoughts about anything that we've discussed? Because this was pushing like 2 hours.
oh well, we did know we were going to kind of push this one a little bit with
Well,
three
we did, yeah,
movies,
we did.
and we kind of killed a few minutes in the middle with our
Technical malfunctions.
technical difficulties. But no, I think that we've covered just about everything. I think we've covered it fairly decently. I'm sure
Hmm.
there are a couple little points we left out, but
Of course.
on the
Well,
whole,
with these
in
kinds of
terms of
discussions, of course. Yeah.
in terms of recommendation, thank
Yeah.
you. Looking at my ceiling, going, somebody give me a sign as to what word I need.
Yeah.
How do
Wow.
I finish this word? Um, I would say see all three. I enjoyed all three of these movies. I know your food's probably going to be showing up in like 5 minutes,
Yeah.
right?
All right. So, another little quick edit we had to do. Skype was stupid once again. No big surprise. So, pick up where we left off. Tom, you said that you recommend all three.
I would recommend all three. I would highly recommend Blade Runner and Ghost in the Shell, especially if you're an anime fan or if you're a fan of noir in general. Both of those are very good. Minority Report is also a solid watch. It is I guess you could call it a classic Spielberg. It has his trademarks all over it. But of the three, if you're only going to do two, I could say that would be the one to take or leave.
I thoroughly agree with that. Blade Runner, like you said, a thorough classic. Absolutely loved it. Ghost in the Shell, even if you're not an anime fan, but you're interested in like really deep like science fiction themes, I think would be right up your alley. And Minority Report, it is good, but I just genuinely did not think it was on the level of the other two. So again, if you're going to take two and leave one, uh, leave Minority Report behind.
Agreed, definitely.
Absolutely. So
So,
before we do the quick little sign off, we will tell you that next time we are planning to have a discussion of the movies that scared us in honor of Halloween, which is coming up very soon. Now, before you ask why we didn't have that discussion today on Friday the 13th, which is when we're recording this, well, we just didn't feel like it.
we also really didn't look ahead to see that this was going to be Friday the 13th either.
Well, there
So
was
we call it
that.
We could call it poor planning on all parts,
We
but we
we
really thought that the Halloween episode being closer to actually Halloween was the better idea.
Yep. So, thank you very much for listening. Again, we're sorry about all these weird, technical hangups that we had with maybe it's just Skype being stupid, maybe it's something on our end, we're not sure, but regardless, regardless of whether when you're watching this, we hope that we were able to give you an interesting discussion. And my name is William.
And I've been Tom.
All right, and have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone.
Bye now. I have my note. Are you doing the introduction now while I'm up?
No, I mean I'm just playing, letting this play over and over. Just like I'm just having it record constantly, so who knows what the hell I'll include at the end of this video.
Great. It's gonna have a nice little shot of my ass as I'm getting up there.
Well, I mean,
So,
no, it's not going to be a shot of your ass because it's recording the still
I
screen. It's
forgot
not
we're
recording
on
it.
radio.
Yeah, this is radio version, which means that people can't see my haggard beard and mustache at the moment, which is great.
All right. I haven't shaved in like 3 days, so
Yeah.
I'm getting a little scruffy myself.
This has just been one of those weeks where, for whatever reason, that aspect of personal hygiene has just sort of escaped from me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like one of those, screw it. I just don't care anymore.
Yeah, I understand that.